All right, remember that this week you're going to have a lot of lab time. That's what most of it is. What I sent everyone this morning was an email that had the completed Chapter 6 on it. All right, Path of Light Studio, which is what I'm going to go over right now. And it also has, which, I pulled out of there also the, there's a second image that we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the steps that are on pages 302, 303, and 304. Ideally, we can get this done in about an hour or so. All right, and then the rest of the period will be lab. All right, remember tomorrow is lab for the entire period, so all 4 hours. And then finally on Thursday, it'll be lab for the first 3.5 hours. Then the last half an hour, we'll do a test review for Chapter 6. And then at the end of the week, day 12, you're going to be testing all day on Friday. All right, first you'll have the written test, which as always will be closed book, closed notes. And then you're going to have the first part of a 2-part test, which is going to be the rest of the period on Friday and the following Monday, all right, for you to work on that, all right? So that's what we've got coming up, just so you're aware of that. Hope everybody had a nice break. It's the last break that we actually get here until November 11th, all right? So it's a good 2 months. So. All right, so again, I'm on page 302. What we'd like to get to by the end of the class period today is what you'll see right now on the screen. All right, so you can see how the path of light is changing. Our navigation that had previously been on the top is now along the sides. These now look like buttons. They're not buttons, but they appear to look like buttons. The picture has been moved from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. It's actually a different picture. The classes doesn't really look too much different. It's a little bit more symmetrical, I guess. The schedule doesn't really look much different either, and we still haven't created the contact page. All right. So again, you've already got the completed one, and as the author did earlier, what she asks you to do is first grab your Chapter 4 chapter that we worked on last week, copy it, paste it, and we're going to make that our new Chapter 6. So right now, after I've done this, my Chapter 6 looks just like you see right here. In other words, you can see that we still have the navigation centered along the top, and it's horizontal where it will be vertical in just a bit. Okay, the classes a little bit pushed over. That'll look a little nicer, hopefully. And the same thing with our schedule. All right, so that's ideally at least what we're going to be changing in here. So with that said, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, they tell you on the bottom of the page to open up or configure the yoga.css in a text editor. So I'm going to open that up. Again, I'm just going to choose, as I have been, Notepad++. The first thing that we're told to add is up at the top, the star. And if you don't know this already, that star that you see up here, that's more or less, that's what's referred to as the universal selector. And literally that means for everything. All right. And what we're told to put in here is box sizing, border box. And ideally, after we do this, what's going to happen is this is going to look a lot nicer. Previously, we'd had that real wide purple border around all of it. And it's going to look a little bit nicer after we do this. All right? So I'm going to save that. I just want to see if it made any kind of difference. Oops, not from there, though. And I don't need that either. And I don't need that. All right. So not yet, but hopefully it will as we go on. All right? And I think I said this to you earlier. You may or may not agree with this. Either way is fine. But two things. First, I kind of like to do a step or two and then check it, do a couple more steps and then check it, as opposed to doing all 11 of these steps that are on page 303 and then checking it, just in case I make a mistake as we're going along. All right, the other thing is, although it's not mandatory, what I tried to do here, if you take a look at how mine is set up, I've got the universal selector, then body, then header, then H1, then nav. In other words, I'm working my way down. It is totally fine if I wanted to. For example, I could have taken the footer and I could have put that at the top. It won't matter at all doing that. All right, but I just thought it made a little bit more sense to do it like this. So, all right, so that's the first thing. Then we're supposed to go into the wrapper ID, which is down a little bit further. And we're told that we want to change the minimum width from 1,000 pixels to 1,200 pixels, and the maximum width from 1,280 pixels to 1,480 pixels. All right, I've gone through exercises like this before, and occasionally a student will raise their hand and say, okay, I understand what we're doing. Why are we doing this? It's just, this is the way the author has laid things out. I'm not going to say this is the best way of doing it. This is the way that she did it. All right, and that's why we're doing it that way. All right. So on the top of page 303, configure the left column navigation area. Modify the styles for the nav element selector. So I want to find the nav. And as you can see, that's, for me at least, is right here. Okay. It says, keep the style declarations that configure the bold text and the padding. Remove the text align decoration. Remember, that's what centered it on the page. So we want to get rid of what we see in gray right there. All right? And as always, if I'm going too fast or if something doesn't make sense, stop and ask, please. All right. It says the nav area will inherit the background color of the wrapper ID. Add style declarations to configure this area to float to the left with a width of 160 pixels. All right. Well, the first thing is we're going to have a width in here. All right. And as it says, it'll be 160 pixels. All right. And I'm trying to remember with the float left if we want to do it here. So I'm checking quick. And I don't think so. I think for that float left, we'll actually do that inside of the files itself. We'll look when we go on. All right. Step 4, configure the navigation hyperlinks to look like buttons. Well, if we look right now, under Nav A, this is all we have. So we're going to have to add for step 4 quite a bit of stuff in here. All right. So it says, edit the styles for the Nav A selector. Keep the text decoration style declaration that you see in here because we don't want the underlines. Also configure styles to use block display, centered text, bold font, 3-pixel gray outset border, 1 em of padding, and a 1 em bottom margin. Well, that's a mouthful. All right, so we're going to add all that stuff right here. All right, so it's just taking it from the top, block display, centered text, and hopefully as I'm putting this in, oh yeah, text align, center, that kind of stuff, it's starting to make some sense to you. All right. Bold font. A 3-pixel gray outset border. One em of padding, and remember, since if we just say this, and this is one thing you should be remembering by now, In this line that I've got here in line 41, that says put 1M of padding all the way around, because we didn't say padding left or right or top or bottom. Since we're just putting one number in there, that means add 1M of padding all the way around. And we want a bottom margin of 1M. All right, ideally at least, that's everything. If we miss something, we can always go back and do it later. That's not a problem. Then I'm going to put the 3 lines that are shown there almost in the middle of the page on 303. In other words, nav A link, color, oh, that's the next one. Sorry, that's wrong. That should be 3F2 860. You can see that after, look at my coloring here, how that word border didn't change because I forgot the colon. All right. Now I'm going to save, I'll come right back to it, but let's take a look at one of the pages and see if we made it look any different. It may or may not look different yet. See that? You can see how we push that down, but that looks, I mean, that's actually looking, I think, pretty much the way that it's supposed to look now. Again, some of the other stuff will change in just a bit. Any questions on anything we've done thus far? No, especially after a break, even though it just was a day. It takes a little while to get back into the swing of things. So. Now on step 5 it says you will organize the navigation hyperlink within an unordered list in later tasks, okay? So the navigation area in 6.58, which is on page 302 in your book, does not show list markers. Code a nav UL descendant selector to configure unordered lists in the navigation area to display without list markers. Also configured it to have no left padding. All right? Again, looking at that, that may or may not make a lot of sense. So let's break it down. Does everybody have this stuff? Okay, then I'll give you a second to get that finished. Because after we get done with these 11 steps, the other stuff that we have to do is pretty minimal. I don't think it'll take very long.
Again, please remember that if for some reason as you're doing this, yours doesn't look anything like it, you've got the completed copy, so you can go back and take a look. Typically, it's something very minimal that you did. Okay. All right, let's move on then. So, very important if you look up on the screen here. Oops. It may not sound like that big a thing, but I want you to all understand it's very important that we set it up like this, because what that says is that's any unordered list that's inside of our nav section. If we left that nav off, that would change any unordered list we had on the page, you know, on the whole website. And if it turned out that we had multiple pages on the website that had unordered lists in them, you could see a really huge change, probably one you didn't want. Again, this is called the descendant selector because the UL is a descendant of the nav. So again, it says only apply this, which we're about to do, to a UL that's under a nav. All right, and the author says here, we don't want any list markers. And I forgot myself how to do that. Is that display? That doesn't look right. So I'm not too proud. I'll jump back into Google. List style none. Sounds about right. All right, so that's the first thing that we're told to do. It says also configure the unordered list to have no left padding. Again, not a big thing, but if you look up on the screen here, notice for the padding left, I just put a 0. You don't have to say 0 pixels. You don't have to say 0 anything because 0 is 0. You could still put in 0 pixels, but it's kind of redundant to do that. That just says no padding. And in this case, no left padding. All right. So that's step 6. Step 7. Edit the styles for the main element selector. And I'll give you a second because I want to make sure that everybody is caught up to this point. All right, so I'm going to find my main here. There it is, down toward the bottom. And it says, edit the styles for main, add new style declarations to configure a 170 pixel left margin and 1 em of top padding.
So there's my margin left of 160 pixels. What's that? Right here? No, mine says 170 in the book. Yeah, I screwed up. All right, thank you. And the padding top should be 1M. And again, this is a time when, not necessarily at this second, but if you want to start seeing the differences between using some things in here that are relative size versus that are fixed size, go back later and change some of this stuff. For instance, change the margin left from 170 pixels to like 3 M's. All right, so change some of the PX stuff to M's and vice versa. Use percentages. Remember that anytime you're saying pixels, you're giving an exact measurement. She is actually setting up this site to be run on a laptop or desktop right now. All right. Whereas anytime you're using M's or you're using percentages, you're giving relative measurements, so they should work much better on any kind of device. All right. Step 7 says to remove the image element selector and style declaration. So everything here for IMG should be gone, which is right under main, so that works nice. So it's gone. Number 8, configure a new class named float left. Well, again, we can put this anywhere, but I'm just going to put it down towards the bottom here. If it turned out that I'm using that float left class everywhere in my document or on every page or whatever, I might want to move it up higher in my CSS file. But again, it really doesn't matter exactly where you put it. But this is a new class. Classes start with a dot. Oh my goodness. Come on. Trying to change my size on here and it won't let me. So, all right. Float left. Floats to the left. And also has a right margin of 4 M's. One thing, I'm going to tell you this, it may or may not sound like anything big to you, but the recommendation is, this isn't a bad name. The class is called float left, and you might say, well, why is it called float left? Well, we're floating to the left. So that actually makes some sense. But for instance, you really, let's say that you decide that you're going to, you want to set some kind of a class, and the color is going to be red, and it's going to be big text. All right, so you literally call it, for the class name, red big text. All right, and we all do stuff like that. But later on, the person that you're writing the site for says, I don't really like red. They want you to change it to green, for example. Typically what happens is you make that change, but you forget to change the name. Now you've got a class named red big text that has green text in it. So the recommendation is when you're naming this stuff, don't put colors and stuff like that in there because they can change. All right, some people still break that rule. And you know, I've said this before and sometimes people think I'm trying to be funny. Not at all. There are no CSS police. There's really not going to be anybody probably watching what you're doing and saying, gee, Ethan, why did you name it that? It just doesn't happen. All right. But again, if you use consistently poor naming structures or convoluted naming structures that really don't make a lot of sense to people, and someone ends up maintaining your site, then they're constantly going to be bugging you with questions. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? And if you're moving on to a different project, you probably don't want to spend a lot of time helping somebody else maintain the project you were working on. All right. So we're up through step 8. Remove the hero selector and style declaration. So that's the one right up above here. That's 9. Number 10, configure styles for a new class named clear with a clear both. designation. That's pretty simple. And then finally, for the last step, okay, and I'm going to put this at the top because I think that at least that's where it belongs. So I'm going to go back up. Does everybody have this? All right, so I'm going back up right near the top, not at the very top, but I'm going to actually put this before the body, and I'm going to type in just what they show in the book here. Header, nav, main, footer, display, block. If you don't understand what that means, what I just put in here, which is what's in gray there, all right, what that's saying is if the person who's running the web page is using an extremely old browser, like something before IE9, the browser may or may not understand those 4 tags. Those 4 tags are HTML5 tags. The browser may not understand understand them. So display them block. Put a blank line before them and after them. That's all it's saying. Any questions on numbers 1 through 11 in this part on the CSS? What we did, why we did it, do you need anything else put back up there or anything?
I did for the nav visited other what did those do?
Okay, the question was for these nav tags that are here, what did we put in here and why did we put them in? Well, first, before we answer that, remember that has to be in a certain order, all right? And to try to answer your question, what we just told the system to do was when we take our mouse, notice when we put our mouse in here how it changes color? And now when we hold, etc., that's what we're telling it to do. Because we're just telling it to change the color. That's all. In this case. But there's other stuff we could do if we wanted to. Sometimes you might see this, and if you again, you said, and I'll print you out the exercises for Chapter 6, but with at least one of those exercises, what they did was they had a bunch of menu options here. As soon as you clicked on a menu option, these were all like a light blue, and they had white writing. It changed so that the background was white writing. I'm sorry. Instead of having a blue-black background with white writing, and now had a white background with blue writing. You'll see that kind of stuff. All right. And so again, it's all for aesthetic effect. That's all. All right. I don't like the fact that this is still pushed down. I was hoping it would have been moved up, but hopefully we're going to fix it in just a second. All right. So we've done the first 11 steps. We're on the bottom of page 303. It says modify the home page. So I want to open up the index page. It says add the HTML5 shim code in the head section of the web page after the link element. So what they're saying in English is right after we add our CSS file there, we're going to add the code that's shown on the bottom of the page. And I'd like to type it in, and then I'd like to go over all of it with you because it may or may not make a lot of sense. That's a bracket, that's not a paren. All right, so it's all the stuff you see there in green on my screen on lines 7, 8, and 9. Whether you realize it or not, this is the first time, even though it looks like it's in a comment, it's technically not. That's the first time you're writing code. You wrote markup previously, but this is the first time you're actually writing code. I'll give you a second to key that in. Now, a couple things for you to realize if you take a look up on the screen here. And again, I'm not in any hurry to finish this, so you'll still have time. You'll notice that the whole thing is inside of HTML comments. Hopefully you notice that. All right? The reason that that's important is if you've got a user who has turned off JavaScript, it is possible for you to go into your own browser and turn JavaScript off. If you turn off JavaScript and you don't put the comments in there, that will display on the screen, and just the actual text will display. It'll think it's text. All right, it'll display it. So by adding the beginning comment line here and the ending comment line here, that keeps it from happening. All right. The other thing is, literally, these are brackets. Don't use parentheses there, they're brackets. It won't work correctly. All right, if you use parentheses. This says if the version of the browser you're using is IE, and if that browser that you're using, the IE is less than version 9. Then it's telling it to add this script. Rather than you having to go and write a script, what this script literally does is it says, hey, if you've got IE 8 or below, and you see a tag you don't recognize, just disregard it. In a nutshell, that's what's happening. But rather than you having to write it, all right, somebody went out there and wrote this script and put it out on http://html5shim.googlecode.com/svn/trunk/html5.js. So you are right there. You are including, that's how you include a JavaScript file. All right, when we get halfway into the course, we're switching over from CSS and HTML to JavaScript. And you will be putting in your own script tags. And you'll be including your own JavaScript files inside of websites. All right, but now what we're saying is we want to include somebody else's. You're not going to notice any difference, not a lick of difference. Why? Because if you're running IE, you're running IE10. And if you're running Chrome, etc., this wouldn't apply. If you're running Safari, this wouldn't apply. If you're running Firefox, this wouldn't apply. So we're only putting this in there for users who are using IE and a version of IE which is version 8 or lower. Microsoft keeps trying to get people, who are using older versions of their browser to download a newer version. But you can't. You can't force people into doing it. All right. I remember this was not that many years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago. All right. I went to a conference up in northern Wisconsin. It was a day-long conference. And I found out, as I took my wife along with me, and about an hour from the conference, my brother lived up there. So we didn't even tell him we were coming or anything. In fact, we got a motel right in the same town he was in, and I didn't tell him. But the next day, I called him up and said, can I come over and visit? All right, I'd never seen his house, etc. So he said, yeah, that'd be great. Point is, I get in there, and I'm not making this up, so this is 4 or 5 years ago. He's using IE4. Why are you using that? Oh, it's a really old machine that came with it, and I never upgraded it. But it doesn't work very well. Yeah, you think? Right? The point is, the last numbers that I've heard, you can look these up online, it's somewhere around 10% of the people who use IE are still using IE6 and lower. All right? That's the kind of people that you're trying to satisfy with this. All right, next we're told, this is the bottom step on page 303. We rework the navigation area, remove any blank spaces. Well, you can see when you look in here, we've got a blank space there, so I'll get rid of it. One there, and one there. All right. Configure an unordered list to organize the navigation hyperlinks. So this should be in an unorganized list. In other words, we want to put here a UL, and at the bottom, we'll want to close our UL, and each one of these will now be inside of an LI tag. Now, if you're like me, you know, I make more than my share of typing mistakes, so I'm going to put it in there once, and then just copy it, all these different tags. Oops. Isn't good. Each hyperlink should be contained within the LI tag. Well, we've done that now. If you turn up to the top of the next page, we're told edit the image tag. All right, so in here we've got an image tag, and it says remove the align equal right. All right, so that's gone. And it says assign the image tag to the class name float left. You may or may not have ever seen that before, but if you look up on the screen here, it's saying here, it says class equal float left. That's one of the classes that we made earlier. All right, and it says change the value from Yogador to Yogador 2. All right, I'll leave that up there for a second so that you can take a look at it. See the comment up above it? This is what we had written earlier in gray here. In Chapter 6, you'll learn how to use the CSS float property instead of the align property. So that's what we're doing. You may or may not remember this, but I mentioned this to you a while back. Since we hadn't yet talked about the float, we used align equal right, and I even call that a hack. So we're removing the hack that we put in to actually do it the way that it's suggested that we do it today. Right. Finally, it says, edit the div element that contains the address information and assign that to the class named clear. All right, I'll give you just a second. So again, we added the class equal float left here. We changed it from the source equals Yogador to Yogador 2, and we removed the align equal right. If you've done all three of those, that's good. Then finally, down at the bottom, it says for that div, for the address down here, we should assign the class clear to that. So class equal clear. So that's the last thing, right there. Save if you haven't. I'm going to run this and see now what it looks like. All right. Well, that looks a little funky. All right. Not exactly what I was hoping for. That looks okay. This sure doesn't look all right. All right. So I've got to look and make sure. The first thing I'm going to do is look. Images, Yogador 2. Do I have Yogador 2 in the images? Nope. Because I copied over the Chapter 4 one. That's why. All right. But I sent you the Yogador 2. So you should be able to copy it in. So let's copy it there. All right. Let's come back and see how that changed things. All right. That looks a little better. This still looks funky. All right. So that's going to have to be fixed. All right. I either forgot something. All right. It says it should look similar now to the page. Remember that validating can help you find syntax errors, test the page. So I may have skipped something. I know that in the example that I copied for you, it does not look like this. This stuff, everything that you see right here, all of that should be moved up to here. So in other words, you can see what it looks like on the screen. What it should look like on the screen is that. You can tell the difference taking a look at it. So I'll have to go back. Chances are at least pretty good that I skipped something in the CSS. All right. It's possible that it could become fixed, so to speak, a little later. We'll see. But I'm not going to worry about it one way or the other. Okay? I'll go back and look at it and see if I can figure out what the problem was. So all we have left are our task 4 near the top of page 304 and task 5 near the bottom of page 304. So in other words, we're almost finished. What I'm going to do is, rather than give you a break, we're going to see if we can finish this by 9 o'clock in the next 12 minutes. And you can take a break, and after the break, you'll have lab for the rest of the period. I think that'll end up working better than breaking it right here. All right. So task 4 says, now open the classes.html file in your editor. All right. It says configure the left column navigation area, navigation hyperlinks, and HTML shiv in the same manner as your home page. Save it and test it in the browser. It should now look like this. All right. Well, one thing before we do this. Okay, what they're saying is we want to grab everything that's in here and we want to make it look like the previous one. Does that make sense to everyone? Well, I don't know about you. We could manually go in and change all that stuff, or we can go back to our index page where we just fixed it. All right, and I can grab everything, my div ID equal wrapper all the way down to the bottom of my nav, grab that, copy it to the clipboard, then come into here, highlight all this, and paste. Now it's fixed. I'd rather do it like that. All right. I mean, not trying to be funny, but if you really would rather type it in because you feel better doing that, you can do that too. All right. My guess is when I run this, it's still going to look funky. See, that still is moved. So this has all been changed, but that still has to be moved up. I'll have to figure out what the problem is with that. All right. They did say too that they wanted, so did we put in? We didn't put in that HTML shiv, so they asked us to put that in too. So I'm going to grab that from my index page and copy that in here as well. So what I changed now on the classes page, if you look up on the screen, was I added this and I redid the navigation to look like that. But rather than redoing them, I just copied them in from my HTML, my index.html page. All right. And like I said, I'm going to go back and look at the CSS in just a second. All right, so that fixes that. So all that's left then is step 5 on the bottom of the page. Notice it says configure the left column navigation, the navigation hyperlinks, and the HTML shiv in the same way that you've done it before. So again, if you look up on the screen, I'm going to grab everything here from that comment through my nav section, copy it to the clipboard, then come in and open up my schedule.html page. All right, come down here, paste that in. All right, save, run this, and again, I've got these. All right, so again, something is goofed up here, but other than that, it looks like just about everything is the way that it should be. Okay, so it's up to me right now, and I'll do this right now, is I'm going to go back and look at the CSS to see if I forgot something.
What did you copy and paste?
Okay, the question was, what did you copy and paste? The answer is, right under, I went back over to the index.html page. And right after the link statement that you see here, we added this shiv. So I grabbed everything from the shiv till the bottom of my nav, because that's all stuff that I've completed. I added this that you see right here where the mouse is going nuts here, and we modified this. But I just copied over everything. And copied that from here to classes, and from here to schedule. All right? So what I'll do is I'm going to go back and double check every single step from task number 2 on the bottom of page 302 and the top of page 303. If I find something that I've missed or screwed up on, all right, I'll let you know what it is. But you have the final working copy. All right, you've got that. That looks like it's okay. Box sizing, border box. The wrapper. We changed down here to 1200 and 1480. That looks okay. We're supposed to go to the nav. Well, it also said this was supposed to float left, and I thought we did that for the 160 pixels. Remove the text declaration. The nav area will inherit the background color of the wrapper ID. Add style declarations to configure this area to float to the left with a width of 160 pixels. Or was that the wrapper that we floated left? Trying to see what, if anything, we floated to the left with 160 pixels. And Valerie, I think that's what you had asked before about the 160. Oops. So I'm going to look in here and see if I ever put in 160 for anything. There it is. That was the nav. All right. I'm going to try to put in a float left here, but I didn't think it belonged there. But I want to see if it fixes anything, and if it doesn't, I'll get rid of it. Well, look at that. There's the home page, there's classes, there's the schedule. And what I changed, if you want to look up on the screen here, was in the yoga.css, under your nav tag, make sure you have that. That hopefully will fix everything. Okay? And as far as I can tell now, it is now looking the way that it's supposed to look. I'm hoping that you're getting something out of this as we do it as class. I appreciate when anyone asks questions. I mean, if there's something you don't understand, I want to know because I want you to understand it. But again, the idea is this will hopefully help you when you're starting to come in and develop your own websites.
My picture on the home page isn't showing
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Did you copy in, remember I sent you that yoga, the number 2 one, Yoga Door 2? Did you copy that into your images folder? Okay, then we'll take a look in just a second. Any other questions? Anything that doesn't make sense? Like I said, ideally at least, yours now is looking like this. So there's the home page, classes, schedule, and the contact page we're not going to do till chapter 9. All right. The rest of the period is yours. And if you have questions on the homework as you're doing it, please stop and or please raise your hand or whatever and ask.
There's the picture, it's in the folder.
Okay, go back, go to your code to where you're referencing it. Yeah. See, you said images, but you didn't put it in an images folder, so get rid of the /images and try it again. So save that and try it again. Just refresh the browser. There you go.
It's supposed to make the header, or not the header, the lily stretch.
What's supposed to make it stretch?
Yeah.
Yours
it
is.
doesn't- It's like the picture's on there, but it doesn't stretch across the whole.
Oh, okay. I didn't think there was anything special that you had to do to make them stretch.
It works for one page, but not all.
Not all pages. Huh. Well, let me look at mine and see if maybe I've got the same situation here. That stretched. So did that. So did that. We'll take a look in just a second.
It works on my homepage, but not in the other page.
Okay, well, we'll take a look. Does everyone now understand? We went over this the other day. Do you all understand what you're supposed to be doing for all 3 of the homeworks? Anybody have any questions on any of those homeworks? Yes.
I don't even know where to start.
Okay, well, the place that I would, okay, the question was, I don't know where to start, or the comment was. So I'd start by coming in here and creating a template. So doc type, HTML, you know, I'd put a head tag in here. I'd put a title tag, and I think there were 9 exercises, so I'd say something like exercise 1 or something like that. Meta tag. And my head, body tag, and my body tag, and my HTML. That's the place to start. And I'd save this one as maybe even, you know, to the desktop as something like template, so I can make all of them off of that one. So template.html or something along those lines, whatever you want to call it. All right, so now I've got that. Then what we're told next is we are supposed to go out to this barleyfits.com, and these are the ones, so I'm on number 1 here. All right, so I can see that I've got, it looks like I've got, let's see, ID equal div before. So I've got what? I've got a div here, 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 and a div there.
So you have to make a CSS file.
Yes, you will need an external CSS for each one of those. So it looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divs, correct? So looking at it from the top, and let's see if I can do this. Let's see if I can cut this size down on here. There you go. So it looks like this before div is all by itself. So I'm going to say here, div ID equal, div dash before. Okay, so that's the first thing. But then it looks like this div1 has got inside of it div 1A, div 1B, and div 1C, correct? So
1A, there's 1B and C's all.
inside of this black one, look at the color around it. That means we have 1, 2, 3 inside of it. Okay? So this before one, now I want to come in and make another div. And the ID of this one is going to be equal to div dash 1. All right? And then inside of that, I'm going to have div ID equals div dash 1A. Then we're going to have another one for B and another one for C. So there's 1B and there's 1C. Then finally, when I get done, that should be an equal sign. When I get all done, I want to end this div.
So we have to end it
What's that?
once. We end it once.
This div right here should be ending, I guess, here. This div right here is ending here, and I guess I've got to end these 3 divs too, don't I?
So for your CSS, you would do div ID or whatever for like before you.
I'm going to show you, but I think what you're saying is correct. So this will say after. Now, if I run this, you're not going to see anything. Would you all agree with that? You're not going to see a flaming thing. There's no code inside of those divs. All right? So I'm going to stick some code in there. And it looks like, I don't know if they really want you to say this where it says ID equal div before, but I'll put it in there. What I'm going to try to do quickly is to literally make this one look like this one. Does that make sense? That's the idea. All right, so I'm going to say in here, ID equal div dash before. Okay? In fact, I don't even need that. That's what I want this to look like. I could have put it in there as a paragraph, I guess, if I wanted to, but I don't see the real reason for doing that. So this one is going to say, now, ID equals div dash 1A. Now I will put in a paragraph because they've got a blank area in there. And I'm going to say lorem ipsum. I'm not going to pronounce that because I'd screw it up. Okay, I think that's everything for that. All right. Now, before I go on, now if I save this, and I'm going to save this, I got it in template still, but if I run it, it's starting to look, you know, you say, well, it doesn't look anything. No, it actually is starting to look like it. There's a little bit of stuff to it. But remember, what I have to do now is now I have to go in and I have to create a CSS file. All right, so I want to come in here. Now I want to add a new file, and I'll just save this. I just am saving this at home as home, but I'll save this one as template.css. All right. So what do we want? Well, as we start taking a look in here, where was it? Okay. I think I closed it, but. All right, so we want it to look like this. Well, the first thing that I want to do in here is that div before. All right, so that's an ID, so pound sign, div dash before, and what? I'll say background purple, and this isn't going to be the right color, but you'll get the idea. Color blue. All right. Then for the div 1, what color is the background? Black. Remember, I can either say pound sign 000000, or I can put the word black in there. There's a lot of ways that can be done. And it looks like the text is white. Oh, this should be background, I'm sorry. Instead of saying color here, that should say background. And then color, that should be white. All right. Then the next one, which is div 1A, it looks like. Well, we want what? We want the background. As far as I can tell, that's red. And the color again here is white. Okay, see what I'm doing? Is I'm working my way down. So let's save this. And let's go back and take a look at the one that we had just looked at the template here. Oh, you know what? What didn't I do? What's not in my head section? My link tag. Yeah. So I've got to come in here and link it. So link rel equal style sheet. href equal template dot css. And you just saw how it looked. All right. See now how it's starting to come together at least a little bit. It's not perfect. So you might have to do some dinking around with it, so to speak. But that's the idea behind this. That's what I want you to do. That's one of the reasons this exercise was chosen. Okay? So that's what the HTML looked like. Again, I've got to come in here now and add all my stuff in here. So that's, you didn't see the red one because I'll copy this just so you can see it. All right, I'm going to copy everything from right here. So that was what did that? That was div equal 1. We'll put in here. This will be div equal 1A. All right. Somehow it's not picking up the red, so something is goofed up in there. Div dash 1A background red, color white. That looks correct. Oh, no, that should actually have worked. Pound FF0000. I could put that in that way too. So it's div dash 1A. Is that other one correct? ID equals div dash 1A. All right, so now I come in here. Again, you see what's happening? And if you say, well, why is yours so big? Well, remember, I can resize and make it look, eventually I can make it look almost exactly like what's on the screen. All right, so we've got those. And I don't know why, but I keep closing what was in there. So we've got the black, we've got the red, now we've got to add the green, and we've got to add the blue. All right, so let's just do that so you can see what the whole thing should look like at least when we get all done. All right, right, so this should be div equal 1b, and that needs an equal sign there too. Div equals div dash 1b. All right. And then finally, the last one that was ID equals div dash 1c. And we have to copy that in there too, so that should be a C. And then coming back to here, the div 1b, I believe that looked just like this, except the background was green. So that's 00FF00 with a color of white. And then finally, we'd want 1C, and I think that was blue. All right, and our header and footer look the same. Everybody agree with that? If you look on the screen. Again, I closed it. But as far as I could tell, the header here and the footer down here look the same. So I don't see the reason to redo those. So in other words, what I'll do is I'll come here and I'll say div before, comma, pound, div dash after. All right. So I've got all that stuff in here. I want to grab what I had here from my before, this, and I want that down here. Except that should say after, and that should say after. Let's save, and let's try to run it. All right. Now, I'd have to do some tweaking, and so that's still screwed up, the ID before and the ID after, but hopefully you at least see the color that it's coming to pass as far as the way that it should be looking. All right. So why didn't that work? So we've got there div dash before, div dash after. Here we've got div dash before, div dash after, so that looks right. ID, div dash before. That's it. With a semicolon there, I think that's what screwed it up. Okay. Does it make sense? So you're going to basically repeat that. All right. And don't worry, you say, well, how come there's some space here? That's not what's important here. The idea is that you're starting to realize how to work with divs, and divs are quite often used when you're starting to separate a web page, especially if you want to build it a section at a time, because as we're seeing here, you can take that div and you can make it a certain color, which makes it easier when you're going through it and you decide that you want to start to debug it if you're having problems. All right? Did that answer your question?